Weed management considerations for late fall and wintertime for next year's planting. That's what we're covering in this episode of XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve.
Welcome to XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve podcast, where real farmers share real insights and real results to help you improve your farming operation. This episode of Cutting the Curve is brought to you by CLAAS, where machines aren't just made, they're made for more. With a wide range of tractors, combines, foragers, and hay tools, CLAAS is a family business just as driven, demanding, and dedicated as yours. Go to claas.com and start cutting your curve with their cutting-edge equipment. And now, here's your host, Damian Mason.
Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve. I've got Gail Stratman here with FMC, and I've got Kelly Garrett, one of the original founders of XtremeAg, and we're talking about weed management. We did a field plot at a field day at Garrett's in June. We were there in June for one of the 5 field days we did at XtremeAg, and it was really educational. I interviewed Gail, and we talked about what we were doing, and they did some crazy stuff where they did like no pre-herbicide and only a post program and different things like that. We didn't talk a lot about weed management this year because sometimes I think that we kind of have this idea, we've gotten so good at it in this day and age, weeds aren't the issue that they were back in the old days. Well, Gail says not so fast. Kind of a Lee Corso reference right there, although you're much sharper than he. All right, let's talk about weed management. What do you think right now? It's fall. We're recording this in October. A lot of the crops are already getting peeled off. You're still running around. You're beating the road quite a bit. You're seeing stuff, and you say, I see problems. I see problems are going to be problems next year, and I want guys to understand that because they're not being preemptive about their weed management now.
Well, like I said, you can make a lot of observations from the combine and take note of those areas of the field where maybe you had more of a weed problem than the rest of the field. Maybe that's where we had water standing this year. The crop wasn't as competitive. Maybe the herbicide got leached away a little bit. That sort of thing. You want to just take a few notes of that, where that's at, how big those areas are, but then don't drag all those weeds across the field and make that 2-acre problem an 80-acre problem or a 100-acre problem, because now you're just looking at spending a lot more money on a whole field, whereas next year maybe you could be paying a little more attention to that area where you had some higher weed.
All right,
the other
Kelly.
thing you can do from the combine, the other thing I was going to say from the combine and fall, it's really kind of kicks off in the fall, is fall applications. We've been really dry here the last month or so we probably haven't had a lot of winter annuals get started yet. But at some point, it's going to rain, and those fall germinating weeds get started, and that's really an opportunity to kind of get a jump start on next year, is understand those fields that are probably going to have some winter annual pressure that you can take care of this fall, so that gives you a jump start into 2025.
Question for you. We're so dry, and I'm not that completely unique here in Northeast Indiana. So dry. Winter annuals, you always think of when, it starts getting cool at night, but, those things, even after the first frost, you still are getting them. If we don't get any moisture, we're not having winter annuals until it might be pushed into the season where herbicide doesn't work because it's getting too cold. If it's too cold for herbicide to work, does that mean the winter annuals aren't going to emerge based on the precipitation or lack thereof?
It may change the number of weeds we have this time of the year, but they just need a couple of warm days. So a lot of times, we'll have that weed seed laying there, and if we get some moisture here in the remainder of October into early November and get some sun on the surface of that soil, you'll start to see things like mare's tail and henbit and chickweed and those things germinating down there underneath that residue where that ground's staying in the 40s yet, and it's not really shut down yet and frozen up yet. And so that's really what you want to kind of pay attention to, because it's relatively easy to take care of those this time of the year with a fairly inexpensive program like, say 2,4-D and Panaflex, or something like that has a lot of crop rotational flexibility, but it can also just make life so much easier. But just because we're dry now, if we happen to catch some moisture, pay attention to what happens in a couple of weeks after we catch that moisture, because I got a feeling these weeds are still going to be coming. As warm as we've been up to this point, those soil temps are still warm enough to germinate weeds in a lot of areas.
By the way, the product you said with a 2,4-D mix, your internet did a little hiccup right when you said that. What's the product I mixed with 2,4-D for the cheap?
Well, 2,4-D, and we have a product called Panaflex, which is a good combination herbicide that short residual product that we put on the fall, very active on many of our winter annual species, but allows you a lot of crop rotation flexibility.
I remember the first time we recorded with Gail, we had this problem.
He's froze up good now.
Yeah. Didn't he live literally like in like a Hutterite community in Kansas or something? He must live. I mean, Jesus.
No, he's in northeast Nebraska. He's not that far from Sioux City, I don't think.
How does he have such terrible internet? This has been 3 years ago. It was like this.
I'll tell you, the cell phone service here it's better today, but the past Friday, Saturday, Sunday, it was pretty sketchy. There he's back.
Hey. Yeah, and mine, and to be honest, mine just within the last 2 hours here. My internet's
three years ago, we recorded you for the first time, and it was like doing smoke signals. And here it is 3 years later, and you're still out there.
Well, they haven't improved it for any of us in the last 3 years. I can tell you that's not part of the infrastructure.
Well, they gave $46 billion to Kamala, and she was in charge of it. Did she fail?
Well, she didn't send it to Gail, and I can tell you that.
I have a sign out here in my driveway that says I'm getting fiber for free, but that's as far as we've got it. The sign.
You got the sign.
Isn't helping matters.
I tried to call Amber 3 times this morning. I finally just drove her to the house because the call won't go through.
Yeah. There was something about 2 weeks ago. What Kelly mentioned. On the same day, I had no Wi-Fi service and internet, or my cellular service was down to SOS on my phone. I hadn't seen that in forever.
We had the SOS thing on the phone for about a half a day, but I'm on fiber and it's good. Okay, we're gonna pick up there again. Creating editing work for our friend Will, and
he needs something to do.
We're going to go. Don't get him pissed. He's going to be here in 2 weeks, and I don't want him being in a bad, pissy mood when he's here because he will be.
How can you tell?
Oh God, I've never seen him in a good mood. All right,
yeah.
We're going to pick up and we'll go to Kelly. You ready? All right, Kelly. Gail's talking about this thing of don't let a 2-acre problem become an 80-acre problem. A weed problem in this patch of field becomes the whole field. I think he might be just trying to sell herbicide because that's not a problem anymore. In the old days, you had really bad weed outbreaks. Haven't we gotten better than that? Or is he actually telling me what is there really a chance that a 2-acre problem becomes an 80-acre problem?
I did think that we were getting better, and I now think it's going the other way. But I don't think it's the herbicide. I believe a lot like the foliar fertility programs we have, I believe the products work. I believe there's a lot of other underlying products that kind of knock the herbicides out at the knees. And I have about 3 things. 2 of them are going to be easy. The other one you're going to think is a little dreamy, but bear with me. The first one is the quality of your water. Okay. And we always just think water's water. I want to give you an example. My brother-in-law, Chad Gorham, put in a reverse osmosis system. Okay. And when he went to terminate his cover crop, he uses regular old well water and 48 ounces of Roundup to terminate the cover crop. Then he used 24 ounces of Roundup in a reverse osmosis system. The 24 ounces with the RO water had a much better kill. You could see it to the row. So the quality of your water will depend. And so then when we talk about that, we think about, well, how's our foliar fertilities working? How's our infertile program working? All those things. You have people in the fitness community that say you should drink distilled water. You should not drink tap water anymore. And then when you see what this does here, what the books that Evans and I have been reading, trying to study this more, Evans is now carrying distilled water around. He won't drink tap water anymore. And some of it's because of the RO water that we're getting from Chad Gorham. The second thing is the adjuvant. The adjuvant makes such a difference. And I used to think when I started farming that was just something that they, maybe they don't want to sell herbicide, but they always want to sell the add-ons. They're willing to upsell you. The adjuvant wasn't a big deal. Now, because of XtremeAg, all the adjuvants we try. Those are the first 2 things. They're easy, obvious things. On my irrigated acres, where I have the well water, the yields are actually backing up just a little bit. Where I have surface water, the yields keep climbing. It's the quality of the water. I've never met anybody with good well water. Those are the first 2 things I would tell you about your chemical program and not allowing it.
The point is, you think herbicide. I want to go back at the beginning here. I was obviously wise-appling on Gail because I don't really think that he's making anything.
No, I know it's.
But I was my bigger point there, Gail, was when you said don't let 2-acre weed infestation become an 80-acre problem. that was a, God, I'm old enough to remember, hiring kids to walk beans because we didn't have effective herbicide programs, and then rope wicks with glyphosate through the front of a tractor and weed hooks and all that kind of stuff. Then we got amazing at it. And then we got a whole bunch of weeds that are breaking through herbicide resistance, weeds I've never seen before. When you talked about mare's tail, hell, we never had anything like that in the Midwest when I was a kid. So to Kelly's point, it's not that the herbicides, granted there's some resistance, but these herbicides at companies like FMC still are effective, but we're taking them out at the knees, to his point.
But let's unpack that a little bit. Back, I remember walking beans too. Back then the herbicides worked. It wasn't that the herbicides wouldn't kill the weeds, they'd kill everything, and the crop safety was a problem. So now what we are still good at killing weeds just like we were then. We've gotten better at crop safety. Okay? So that's what I think we've gotten better, to be quite honest.
All right. So with that in mind, we've got this issue of water, you think, and we've got adjuvants, which is a problem. What's the third one?
Soil imbalance. So I'm interested to see what Gail thinks about this. This is something we've been reading about. And this was TJ Cardis from Soil Biohealth, my cover crop guy. We talked about this. And it's soil imbalance. And he talked about a book, so Evans and I bought it, When Weeds Talk. And what a great spot to talk about this on a podcast. In the book, Gail, I would be interested for you to read the book, Damian, you as well, When Weeds Talk. It's a manuscript you can buy. And it says that the author of this book, his theory is that Mother Nature germinates the weed because of a soil imbalance. Most of the time, it's not enough soluble calcium. And so, Gail, I'll tell you, every year the corn germinates, the weeds, the soybeans germinate, things like that. But a weed seed can lay dormant in the soil for 30 to 50 to even 70 years. What makes it germinate? And my oldest son, Vern, the Iowa State agronomy grad, things like that. He said, well, Dad, it's water and moisture and sunlight and things like that. I'm like, son, the corn germinates every year because of that. What makes that soybean seed lay, or not soybean seed, what makes that buttonweed seed or water hemp seed lay there for 50 years? Yeah, and then germinate? What makes it? And the book says that when the soil gets far enough out of balance, Mother Nature sends a frequency to germinate it to try to incorrect the balance. And here we come with chemicals to kill it, and we're fighting Mother Nature. And if we would correct the soil, we would correct the weed control problem.
Because generally when you correct the soil, your crops are doing better, your crops are healthier, they're more competitive. And so the weeds have less of a chance to get started or take advantage of that situation. Weeds are they're a pest like anything that will take advantage of a negative situation, whether that's disease, whether that's insects, whether that's weeds. And so when you've got something in your field that's not quite right, that's generally where you will see the weeds take advantage of it, because they have such a greater genetic variability or genetic makeup in them that allows them to compensate for a lot of these situations where your crop just can't compete as well. And so, weeds are definitely opportunistic. And when you get a field that's out of balance, whether that can be nutritionally or, whether you got soils that maybe you got waterlogged areas, those kind of things, all those kind of things that negatively impact crop production are going to tend to favor the weeds, and you're going to see that in a real quick hurry.
I agree.
I want to go with considerations. We said weed management considerations, and we're recording this fall of the year, and we're trying to make sure we stay on top of this and ahead of it. So you already talked about winter annuals, and now you talk about Kelly's three things: water, adjuvants, and soil imbalance, which has become his big thing about the balanced soil. And I think there's a lot to this. In fact, I really appreciate the illustration to your kid, Vern. Well, weeds germinate because of moisture and sunlight and soil temperature. I'm like, well, why didn't they germinate in their first year? Why did they wait around until their 50th? Because you're right. I've read that thing as well, that weed seeds can hang around for a lot longer than the stuff that we're putting out of a bag, right? Water. First off, from a water management concern, before we get into the water, the adjuvants, and soil imbalance, Gail, obviously, while it's still warm enough, get out there and take care of your problem spots right now, between now and New Year's, between now and Christmas, whenever the temperature is right? Yep.
Yeah. I mean, get out there, look for those winter annuals. Like I said, just because it's been dry doesn't mean that there maybe not be some areas, especially if you got irrigated fields. You've been watering late in the year. That's typically probably where you're going to see the winter annuals coming now. Just make sure that you don't miss them this fall. And suddenly you're looking at it in December or early in March next year, and it's like, holy smokes, there's a lot more out here than I typically thought there was. So, that's the place where you can really get a jump start and save you some money because, depending on what the weather conditions are like next spring, if those weeds get a really good start on you, now you're looking at spending a lot more money in your burn down programs ahead of that 2025 crop. And that just challenges your residual herbicide program that you're putting out and just puts you behind the 8 ball from the start next year. So fall applications are a great way to save yourself some money as well as really put yourself ahead of the game in front of that 2025 growing.
What's the temperature need to be for my winter annual? Do I need 50-degree ambient air and 40-degree soil? What do I need to kill them?
No, typically you just need them so that you haven't had enough frost on them where you've lost all that green material on the top. I've done applications in early December and we've had multiple frosts on them. You've still got some green material out there, but that plant is pulling reserves to its root system to store for the winter. Take that herbicide along for the ride and really give yourself a chance to kill those weeds with Mother Nature helping you along. So you can spray those things as long as you can get out there in the field and do a good job of application and things aren't completely frozen up solid. You can do a really good job of fall applications. But I would say typically in the 40s is probably where you want to be, 40s on up.
All right. Kelly said that then weed management considerations at this point are, we'll assume that he's already got that part handled. The spraying, handling trouble spots. He's going to send out the crew and take care of that. Water. What are you going to do? You going to have Evans bring enough jugs of reverse osmosis water to fill your spray tank? No, you can't do that. What are you doing?
Well, what Chad did was put in a system that filters the water. And I believe, Chad isn't afraid to be outside the box like we are. And I would imagine that before we go to the field here next year, there'll be a reverse osmosis system here in our building.
So you will be doing it. You will be.
Yeah, it really proved to be beneficial.
Yeah, and I'll say short of doing something like that for those guys that maybe aren't going to go that far is check your water. How many guys just load up water out of a well of that, never ever think to actually understand what's the pH of that water? How hard is it? What kind of mineral content is that in? Because there's a lot of buffering agents that you can add to that water out there, as Kelly talked about, adjuvants that can really have a dramatic impact on that and keeping products in solution, keep them mixed up, keep things from precipitating out. If you just understand what you're actually dealing with the water, because as Kelly said, water is not water.
Water isn't just water, and maybe you don't need to go as far as putting it in an RO system. Maybe you just need to double up on the adjuvant, like Gail's talking about. I absolutely agree that might be all you need to do. And it might not get you all the way there, but doubling up on that adjuvant, if your water's a problem, will make a huge improvement.
So, exactly. There are adjuvants that are water treatment. There's adjuvants that help you stick, they're like a surfactant. There's adjuvants that help penetration. There's adjuvants, but you're talking about, there's an adjuvant that we work a couple of companies that make it. That's just that it makes your water not as acidic.
Well, when they tell you what the dose of the adjuvant should be, let's see what Gail thinks, but that's probably at like a 6.8 pH. What if your water's a 7.8? What if your water's a 7.8 and you're putting in the recommended amount and it doesn't get you far enough? That's what I'm saying. You maybe just need to double. It'd be a very inexpensive solution to just double the rate of the adjuvant. The average adjuvant's a couple bucks an acre. Spend $4 an acre instead of trying to double up on the chemical or have to do a rescue treatment or have poor weed control. Double up on the adjuvant to get where you need to be. But you won't know that until you test the water.
Yeah, one of the most basic water conditioning agents that everybody's familiar with is AMS, ammonium sulfate, and they think they throw it in just because, well, that's what they call for with Roundup. Well, there's a reason you're doing that, is because you're trying to address some hardness issues and mineral issues in water. But unless you test that water, do you really understand what rate you need? Some guys will try to get by with a lower rate of AMS because they just don't want to carry that much product, when they actually probably need a lot more because of the type of water they got. Check your water and understand why you're doing what you're doing. And a lot of times you get a lot better result and understand where your dollar is going and why you're putting those inputs there, so you can understand the return on investment you should expect from those products.
What about then the soil imbalance? By the way, I never heard as much about water until the XtremeAg thing came along, and I'm not sure that any of us did 10 years ago, but it's become very apparent. Like when Kelly talks about calcium levels, or obviously Matt used a municipal source that killed his biologicals, so it was it's a consideration that we didn't even think about not too long ago. What about soil imbalance? That one's going to be a little harder to tackle in the short term between now and spring for your plants. Am I right, Kelly?
Yes, it can. In this book, I'm interested to try these. This is just a book that we just finished reading here a month ago. I'm interested to try these things, but I believe it to be very logical and reasonable because what we've seen, when we're supplying enough soluble calcium, we see big things yield-wise, and so it stands to reason that imbalance. And you're right, I've been talking about that. Here's just another reason that it makes sense: working in tune with Mother Nature and doing that. There was an example in the book, I have to try it, talked about spraying soluble calcium or molasses with the chemical and how much better the weed control could be. I never heard of anything like that, but I'm sure I'm going to try it. But that soil imbalance is a big reason why those weeds come.
Got it. You agree with that, Gail? You think, which one of those things, water, adjuvants, soil imbalance, which one's the bigger one? I'm going with water. Well,
I'll always start with just from where Kelly, the soil imbalance thing, because I see the biggest advantage you can have to weed control is the crop itself. Making sure that crop is uber competitive, because you can go into some of the worst weed situations, but if you've got a crop that's so competitive in that environment, gets off to a good start, grows well, and that 50% of your battle, it is amazing how well you can make a mediocre herbicide program look really good if the crop is really where it should be. And then vice versa. If you have a crop that just isn't doing well, it's under fertilized, it doesn't have the nutritional, it's just not growing where it is, it's in compacted conditions, it's all those sorts of things that are just making that crop struggle to grow. The herbicide program can only make up for so much of that. Eventually, the weeds are going to take advantage of that situation because the crop just can't compete with it. Like I said, the best thing you can do for a crop is make that canopy dark middle of the season, and not allow those weeds to germinate after that. And so getting your soils balanced, getting your nutritional inputs balanced, getting that crop to the best start, whether that's a starter fertilizer early in the season, whether that's your nutrient balance throughout the season, anything like that, that'll give that herbicide program, that weed control program, an advantage is the best thing you can do.
Kelly, get me out of here. Thanks, by the way, Gail. Weed management considerations, end of season, heading into next season. You gave us the three bigs, and he just gave us that. Is there anything else that you've learned in your 25 plus years of managing weeds?
Little weeds are easier to kill than big weeds. So like addressing the winter annuals, a lot of times on some of our ground, or especially early in the season when we feel it's warmer, we'll put some 2,4-D in with the plant food, make that pass. But little weeds are easier to kill than big weeds. And looking at like that, a lot of times when we're doing harvest, like as Gail said, we're in such a hurry trying to get the harvest in, you're not thinking about that. If there's the opportunity to make that fall pass or to put a burn down in that fall pass, yep, I think that's a great idea. It will really help you out come next spring.
Gail, the person that's kind of a skeptic saying, what the hell difference does it make? They're not competing with a crop. I don't have any crops out there all winter, so why do I care for some weeds growing out there? I'm going to save my money. Answer me.
Well, like I said, you let those weeds get established now, and Kelly just mentioned a small weed's easier to control than a big weed. You now let those weeds grow throughout the winter, and now they come back as weeds that want to move to seed production stage and all that. They're pushing all their energy upward next spring, and you're trying to push a herbicide downward to kill that plant. You're going to use a lot higher rates. You're going to spend a lot more money, and most of the time, the level of control you get isn't what you want it to be. So like I said, get it done and get it done right. And, there's a right time and a wrong time to do it. Fall applications are typically a great time to control all these little weeds that are going to be a problem next spring.
If you want to learn more about this, his name's Gail Stratman. His email is Gail, Gail.Stratman at FMC.com. You can probably go to the FMC website. He was with Kelly Garrett. We're talking about weed management considerations. Again, you know what? I think you almost could have gotten lulled into it thinking that of all the stuff you've got to consider, weeds aren't that big of a deal anymore. Well, we're learning that you know what they are. And then that's why we're talking about it here at XtremeAg. We're always ahead of the curve here at Cutting the Curve. Hundreds of episodes just like this at XtremeAg.farm. Also, hundreds of videos that I have shot with people like Gail and Kelly at their field days, at these events to help you. It's all free. It's a library of free, applicable information that you can use to help your farming success grow. Go to XtremeAg.farm if you want to take your learning to the next level. Become an XtremeAg member for just $750 a year. $750 a year, you get direct access to guys like Kelly for a question and answer platform. You get access to the data and the information from all the field days and the trials. What worked, what didn't, what did we learn from that? You can join this in our webinars that we're doing at the end of the year to discuss that. Also, you get special offers from our business partners. For instance, you could have gone to Commodity Classic for free the last 2 years. Go to XtremeAg.farm. We have a special going on right now. If you sign up between now and December 13th, you'll get 18 months for the price of 12. That's only $41 a month to become an XtremeAg member. Check it out. Till next time, thanks for being here. That's Gail. That's Kelly. I'm Damian Mason. This is XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve.
That's a wrap for this episode of Cutting the Curve. Make sure to check out XtremeAg.farm for more great content to help you squeeze more profit out of your farming operation. Cutting the Curve is brought to you by CLAAS, where machines aren't just made, they're made for more. Visit CLAAS.com and start cutting your curve with cutting-edge equipment.